What another lender lender she some bashi that some son jodu shatu so go down son jodu shatu tela and jitten ba down chaba tuji jam suini go down chaba tuji jam suini marbe yeah.
So once again, we're looking at Lama Tsong-kha-pa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and specifically at the karma section, or the section on karma. And if we look at the outline of that section, we'll find that there are three categories. First, reflecting on karma and its effects in general. Second, reflecting on karma and its effects in detail, or the particulars of karma and its effects. And then a third category of how to engage in virtue and abandon non-virtue after reflecting on karma and its effects in general and specifically. So that's the third section. That can also be labeled as cultivating ethical behavior. So if we look at that third section, because we've gone through the first two sections, the reflection in general and detail, we can look at, there are two categories in that section when we're looking at the outline. So the first category is just the general explanation. So that's number one. And then category number two is in particular the way of purification through the four opponent powers. So that's the second category. That category is where we are currently in. So yeah, that's it. Dixon.
Yes, right. What are the Bashishi to the La Casugre? Tati them, but Chaba Tuji Jambitu. And Chaba Tuji Jambitu.
Less.
Chaba Tuji Jambitu the La Chaba Tuji Jambitu the Tanjaji Saji Jiro.
Less.
Saji Jigan Jiganan Tambut Marve. Saji Jiganan Tambute. Tangasu Jo Toma Mabanda Diba to Lutanga. 이주군 디바 모사제 사르데 제만하고 사주에 말에 덤바 시주 덤바 토지 전지 시주 비추 모송요 들매우르스 담보체 네바 동안 시주 비추지 송바 디바 시주 비추 말베 지역은 담보 네바 송바.
So when we go to the second category in that third section, in particular the way of purification through the four powers, we find Jayan Sheba's commentary states that there are 8 categories within this particular section. So the first category deals with, deals with this point. Since beginningless time, we have accumulated non-virtue. Sometimes, even if we didn't wish to accumulate it because we were under the influence of our afflictions, or we didn't know, or carelessness. So we need a method or a remedy to serve as an opponent to that non-virtue. Even again, if there's a non-virtue that one didn't really mean to do, but did because of those previously mentioned reasons. So this is the first category of Jayan Sheba's commentary. And then the second category is a remedy for downfalls, or a remedy for infractions. And then the third category is how to remedy sins or great misdeeds, or misdeeds in general. So that word they've translated as sin is the same word that I always use for misdeeds. So if you see that interchange, that's why. Khensur Rinpoche.
Tibata to Monte Jebatel, Jansen, or the Jebatel, Jan such a good in such a good in Dua, Jigan on the Jebatel. Jigan on Tamuto, the Lut and Agatiba Musaj of Tagasaju, Matuma Tuji Tenji, Shiju with Tomo Sumba, Begu, Tomaje, Nibatua Shiju to the Nibaje, Debashiju to the Sumbaje, Jiba, Tasu to Monte Jebatel. Jibarota, what till Tanjajibe, such a good chicken to go.
Go, Tambo.
Go on that Tambo to what they Tambo to Gugnan Deba Talu Sadre, Gugnan Tambuto, Gugnan Tambute, Junken Tanyabo, Tu Maduji, Wangi, Datura, Tasonji, Yabitune, Deba Taluza. Ta Deba Talu, Deba Shakin,
Kashi
Kashi Tiba Chem, Shanju Sambata, Rajedan, Nietudan, and what the Salun Damana Mobres. Then the Damana Mobius on Deba Talu, and Damana Mobu, Chiba Mares, what the Saji, what the Tambutel
Nipa.
Tatambo Kutulan, Richard Saji Tenshana, Pejina Jatan, Guchukuji, and good Tini Battle, Deba Talu Sadro. Jado Guchukuji.
Guchi?
Koji 8.
J, okay.
98.
Less.
And what the Tini Bando Niba. Deba Talonus. What the Tambo do you do?
Kalpa Ja, Le.
What then, man, that good and it's on that going on Tambut.
Okay, decent. So when we look at Jayan Sheva's outline, we find first that since beginningless time we've accumulated these things even though we didn't mean to, and we need a remedy or a method. Second category is how to remedy infractions or downfalls. Third category is how to remedy misdeeds. And then the fourth category we find a philosophical inquiry of the and then the first category being the many ways in which misdeeds are removed. So we find the points that are made that it depends upon the purifier and so forth. So these points are all made within this section. And then the second point is the go nangla the nipa tambo de lapsa
tambo deba talu dro
deba dalo
o kudul inchit kilu la jana o tene takaso kore ngando dunga chimbuji juna dunga chunju junjuwas deba talu jiche
laso
junjuwas ta ngando je jang ti dunga munyu ken jiwaris deba talu ni badche tene tati telangu nawa zanje ande ngando je deba tande jiwaris
laso
teji de jun munyu go ba na jun tong no na tande jiwaris keba ta nyugo de loji dan da waji dan chuchu chi wo de nyun ta na ge men ro
laso
o de de ta do de jer me de song do de nyugo ba na yo ren tong su ten nyugo go ba ju de ten nyugo go ba de ten a te yuwa de deba sha ken de tiba chenbo da ra je da ne tu da sha ken de Sanlu Damara Chevares, Sanlu Damara Cheba Moboyas, Deba Dalo Chiba Mare Moboyas, Chelmishu with the Sundua. What about the Tombutre?
So then going to the 9 categories and looking at the first one, we find the first category is the sins are removed in several ways. So then the first way is that it is when small sufferings occur instead of the great sufferings of rebirth in the miserable realms. So this is a way, the first way. Another is that even if you are born in a miserable realm, you do not experience its sufferings. Still another is that a mere headache in the present life serves to remove the sin. Likewise, the sins whose effects you must experience for a long time may become ones whose effects you experience for only a short time, or that you need not experience at all. There is no certainty about how sins are removed because it depends on whether the purifier is of great or little strength. So here the meaning of whether the purifier is of great or little strength is referring to the person who is doing the purifying and what their level of motivation is. So for instance, if the bodhisattva level being is doing it, then it has the greatest level of strength. If a Pratyeka Buddha level being is doing it, then it's a medium level of strength. And if a hearer or Shravaka is doing it, then it's a smaller level of strength. So we see that the being who is doing the purification really kind of his or her level of realization kind of dictates the level of misdeed that's removed. So that's what's meant by that. Whether the remedy is one in which the four powers are complete or incomplete, intense or not intense, or long or short duration, and so forth. So these points are all points in section number 1 of those 9. Okay, Diksong Rinpoche. So then we find all of these ways in which misdeeds go away or are removed. So if we know this section well, if we know these points well, then we can say, oh, these are signs that some kind of misdeed has been purified. And then Jaya Shiva Nipa Mingare the Sache.
Nipa the Lord the Suguta, Nipa le Nebi legend Zawana Tatusa. Nebi legend never told you some shadows in the Zawanin Tanus. Tabichu, what the Dudu was what in the Matan waters, until that to watch long. Nebi legend told you some shadows Jibaina. And the Lena Kebajan Chumasa Samana, then you told some shadow Majibala, Gumbare Madu, Shadow Genata Sibaris, what the Jetun, also Jetun, the Jenson, what they Kalelu Shada, who's a much on edu.
So the second category in those 9 points deals with another point of inquiry into a statement that we find in the sutra in the text on discipline that karma does not perish even in 100 eons. So here, this section deals with the point that even karma that is certain, or karma that one is bound to experience, can be purified. And then this section answers that question that is made kind of at the top here. So I'm just going to read it. The statement in both sutra in texts on discipline that karma does not perish in 100 eons is made with regard to karma for which you have not cultivated a remedy for the 4 powers. So this is basically responding to a question or a doubt that might arise, because in the texts on discipline and on sutra, the sutra texts and the texts on discipline, or the Vinaya texts, we find this quote from Lord Buddha. So Lama Tsong-kha-pa is responding to a doubt that might arise by the person who's reading this, and showing how this statement is referring to karma that has not been purified, karma that has not had the application of the 4 opponent powers, so that even karma that is certain can be purified. So if there is a subject that is karma, then that subject can be purified if it is a karma. So here, when we read on, we find a quote from Haribhadra's long explanation of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra in 8,000 lines. Thus, with powerful remedies, you can completely eliminate the unfavorable factors which diminish when you possess the group of remedies. This, for example, is like the tarnish on gold, because all such things as obstructions to the sublime teaching will necessarily diminish, as just explained. You will completely eliminate infractions which originate from arrogance. So the point here is that just like gold can be tarnished, no matter how much tarnish is on it, one is able to clean it away, clean that tarnish away. So likewise, any type of negative karma, even if it is karma that one is certain to experience, can be purified, just like all of that tarnish can be removed. So that is what is meant here. And what is, in this section where it says, because all such things as obstructions to the sublime teaching, this is referring to the non-virtue, which is abandoning the Dharma. So if you have this, all such things as abandoning the Dharma will necessarily diminish, as just explained. You will completely eliminate infractions which originate from arrogance. So it's stating that even that negativity of abandoning the Dharma can be purified by the application of the 4 opponent powers. So this is the second section in Jayan Sheva's outline. Digson Rinpoche.
Ta sumba dilwa tere. Adene sumba ne kaya le nang keba jaya ne sumba kaya le nang keba jaya ne sheshawa la suba ne nebi shukumba me na sheshawa sheba shatesa le nang keba jaya chumasa sayade nebu toju song shadan sheba me na keba jaya chusa mari sheba jaya matu ane nebu toju song shadan jin diba ta mesana tangda dan gede long dan gede ni che tene mange bele dan bele ne jaju du sere se tel tönsen ni hudo ni tönsen ni hudo kaya le na keba jan she shawala suba somba tene ne bi shu gomba mena she shawa shebra shate tata mai na sa ne bu do ju sha dan she ne de ba ta mes la ba ina tene no dan ge de re riba dan ge ures no dan ge res 네 롱도 나서 담아가지고 하고 봤다마들 네 본성 주변도래 네 매신세바 네메베제 소노마지 쇼와 네 마메 자 세보데 포송자네 디바 다투 송송 다던게노도 테마이 로모베지로 롱동게노 그레스 와타메서 라바이나 따다던게 용르스 따다
라서
와데 돈이 공이나 Denzil menebata. Taba dru maimishena, duzij rul menebata, tustansuna, wade chuna deba maruwa shesuna, denzil menesa lautu maro. Denzil nesuna, nyamu nebata, nyamu onge, diba nebata, diba taba wate riba ngeyo rese ta.
The denzil nu dene?
Denzil nena, denzil jebu nyamu nedawa.
Okay.
Nyamu onge sabi lel nenu marba, diba. Dibal nöndro, dibal nöndro, diba tan marbe.
Lesser.
What Madasa think into those
Lesser.
Till Nangani do it.
Sharia Budu.
Yeah.
So the next.
What the Majiluna, Lojana, Kalena Kabajana, Shesha Subatene, Nebi Shukuba Mena, Shesha Shiba Shatis, Nebutoz on Shadan Shiba Mena Shibuturis, Tata Mainas, Nebutoz on Shadan in Tibata Yuba Maina, Ribatan that and Gavungris, do the Mobutan Gavan Juro, Jeremici, Tasini Town Dota, or the Nenga Shibrim Duta. Tanu. Nungeta Nebile the Mangabile Deja Wurs.
Okay.
Nuang never Sombayan, Deniji Shiba, you know. Tanuang never does on Shadow Magina, never the never the Nunga Logres. Mangaba Sombane, Nebi Shuma, Nebi Shadow Majiba, and couldn't ever you my never American lady Logres. What enjoy your Maris? She never, she's what about it.
Okay, so the next section has 2 points that are made in that section. So it begins here. You should understand that the statement, any karma at all, even for 100 eons, is qualified by, if you have not cultivated the group of remedies. Were this not the case, there would be a contradiction with reason and a contradiction with many sutras. You can also understand the Buddha's expression, karma whose effects you will definitely experience, with the qualification that you have not cultivated the group of remedies. Understand the Buddha's expression, karma whose effects you will not definitely experience, refers to effects that occur only sometimes, even though you may not have cultivated the group of remedies. So the first point that's being made here is that if there hasn't been the application of a group, let me just read this. This quote, any karma at all, even for 100 eons, is referring to karma, if we're speaking of non-virtuous karma, that has not had the application of the 4 opponent powers. If it were the case that there was not the possibility of purifying certain types of karma, then that would contradict first reasoning and then scripture or sutras. For instance, if the 4 opponent powers could not serve as a remedy to our misdeeds, then the quote from the Tantra requested by Sabahu would be wrong. So we find the points that are made where it states that the recitation is like the fire that burns up the misdeeds, the wood of our misdeeds, and the sun that melts the snow of our misdeeds, and the butter that illuminates and dispels the darkness of our misdeeds. So we find this point being made that states that our misdeeds can be purified. If this statement held that all misdeeds would come to fruition, and even misdeeds that had opponents, then this quote that was made would be incorrect, and we'd find a contradiction there. But we have to understand that the quote that's being made about any karma at all, even for 100 eons, is referring to non-virtuous karma that has not had a remedy or an opponent, hasn't had the application of the 4 opponent powers. So this contradiction with reason, when we look at reasoning and we look at what the root of cyclic existence is, we would find that it is the grasping at true establishment. So we couldn't say that the understanding that things are not truly established doesn't harm the grasping at true establishment, or the understanding of emptiness doesn't harm the grasping at true establishment. Just like we can't say that the understanding that a rope is a rope and not a snake doesn't harm the belief that sees the rope as a snake. We have to understand, and we have to see that, yes, the understanding that things are not truly established certainly harms the idea that grasps at things as being truly established. So if we get rid of the grasping at things that are truly established, what arises from that, the afflictions, then can be gotten rid of. And then the actions that we do under the influence of our afflictions will be gotten rid of. And then we will eventually be able to get rid of all of that non-virtue. So if we were to interpret this point that was made without understanding the commentary, we would think that it wasn't possible to get rid of these non-virtues. But that idea that it's not possible contradicts logic, contradicts reasoning. And the next point is that it contradicts many sutras. So we find in the Tantra requested by Sabahu those points that are made, and it would contradict that if that were the case. And then the next point that is made, the next category, deals with the difference between karma that is uncertain. And then, let me just read it. You can understand the Buddha's expression, karma whose effects you will definitely experience, with the qualification that you have not cultivated the group of remedies. Understand that the Buddha's expression, karma whose effects you will not definitely experience, refers to effects that occur only sometimes, even though you may not have cultivated the group of remedies. So when we're stating the karma that is uncertain, that's not the same as karma in general. This is a different point that's being made. So karma whose effects you will definitely experience is karma which has not had a remedy, which has not had that cultivation. But that's not an uncertain karma. So these are some points that are made, the differentiation between karma whose effects you will definitely experience and those that you will not definitely experience. So that's the second point within that.
What the Naga Momajil Dashon Rudo, Deshimuda Judu Yamar, Deshimuda Judu, Deshimuda Judu did not in Koso, what the Londa Ribani could do, Deshimuda Judu Mabaina, and the Londan getting down to get the Nande Lorini Togoro. Tenaji Joangashi Mesana. And the Londan get a river down that and get the rest, but the Momajil can run with that.
What
in Nangachu daughter?
Joangashi
Mesalana, and then Joangashi ever long down River Mukum, down that and get the rest. What the judge will do?
Nandel Nala.
Nandel, what the Kasakan daughter.
The Ale, Denji Judru.
What the judge?
Anna? Okay.
Judge will do.
So this part is very important. Because we would say, then we could understand when the points that are made in the commentary on the Compendium of Valid Cognition, which is the Pramanavartika Karika by Dharmakirti, where we find that if points that are made like this, if the 16 attributes of the Four Noble Truths did not exist, then that would contradict logic, that would contradict reasoning, because we can find many correct signs to establish these. If there was no previous life or previous rebirth, then this would contradict scripture, and that it would also contradict reasoning, because then we can establish previous lives by the use of many correct signs. And then we also establish it by way of seeing scriptural pronouncements that establish previous lives. So this section is very important to understand. It's very similar to these points that are made in Dharmakirti's commentary on the Compendium of Valid Cognition. Very important to know. This third thing.
Ta jiba do tere jiba de junkin tu chun 다 대바 샤동 제게 도와데 또 집에 요아는 리 요아를 집 몸이 요아르스 또 집에 있는다 리 있는다 안에 어때 중국 있는다 안 대바 달로 먼저 송용 그래서 말이야 집에 있는 집에 다 상주 생활소 샤동 진 대바 집에 다 그래 라제 리 네트워크 총 전화에 아주 샤동 집에 있나 산로란데 타송 요디 대바 달로 담만다 란데 타송 몸이 요아르스 어디 손바들 제바들 대땡 도스타
Then Jipa got
어디 자기 때문에 어떠로 아니 망해 봐 손바네 예비 수고 마고 세장 제보 런가와니 예비 소 셰소서 어디 손바들어 손바 찬들어 다 제바들에 다 고추고 대들 샤바당 담발아 수보데 되는 지바던 고추도와 대다 샤바당 담발아 수보데 샤다지게 상주 sembe 샤다 진 디바치면 다는 라제 은디 다는 그래 니토 중고 다는 그래 안는 사로 자치베 기치베 다 그래 딩디 다 그래 중고 다 그래스 어디 대대가 요르스 말바 안데 디바까지 다 바이나 답이 쳐 되게 안에 동해 용고 말에 내손 지금 말했어 안에 거와를 되는 컨트롤 말봐 컨트롤 거와를 치면 봐다 딘다 좀 가지는 여봐 얘나 뒤쪽에 도용 말을 말 지금 말에 살 지금 말했어 뭐들 대대도 손이다 대다 샤바당 담발아 네부터 손군 디바 샤바스 네부터 손군 디바 샤바 딘지로 샤바당 담발아 수바 내가 디바 사고 매냐바 라수바도 수인지로다 담발아 수비 나민지비 네바냐 냐브르시 셰바나스 나민지비 네바 셰바 다 디바 샤나 제기나 소수 샤다징 루런지 타송게 디발 뇌누고다 디발 뇌수 되게 제부도 용고 말에 동해 용고 말에 나송 지금 말에스 어디 때는 도스 냐버시바나네 젠다 퇴장 남에 진바 만줄라사 남에 용고 말에스
Lesa.
어디 디발 자르와 대지도 로다당 콘르니데 그살 뇌용으레스
Lesa.
ane luta jeba tang kondru gaza jomba da sonte sa
Lesa.
tugum bawalis ta luta kondru ge gata jomba yinan jombi chu tagara ane dawa yungo mare mal chigma hal chigmare diba rabures yinsan tugum bawal sondu sa tugum bawal ben le denjero tugum bawal kangi che diba yang 다 루바당 뇌생지 냐버는 좋아하스 아니 강기세 거야 다 루바서 루다 말베 뇌생지 공도로 냐버는 좋아하스 먹어야 멤버당 동바당서 멤버서는 샤벌 고만도 먹어야 멤버당 동바당 차발라 수비 예비 또 냐버 줘봐다네 젠수비 두시장 아니 Guadamaki Sabuji Nebanyape Kanle Kanji Debunjuan Jurusa. What about the Chitedua? Tashanju Sembe, what Shadon in the Debachibutan, Raji and Dean, and then Rodi Tasun Marbo, Debakazi, Tabaina, teacher the gay, Dugan Humar and Jigmares, Chije. Tani ba de mar ta kondu ane kondu da lota gaza ne na ne bi che te do yu mare mal jig ma lal jig mares wo de teng do so de ta
Then Charon the Nyawa le yuna the Yida jegre the last
ta nyawa pheje le wo de ma so le ji de ba da nga ge de ba mo yo ro ta o to su ki cho to ni wal chen de re ding ge dal je re 네 종을 돈을 제는 그래 와도 가서 대담아 대바다로 가도 담을 진짜로다.
Okay. So the next point that's made begins here. In this way, confession, restraint, and so forth weaken the capacity to bear fruit. So when we look at how much it weakens it, it depends on the purifier. So if it is a bodhisattva, we find the greatest level. If it is a Prajika Buddha, a medium level, and a Shravaka or a hearer, the smallest level. So the capacity that is weakened it depends upon, again, the person purifying it. So it says such karma will not bear fruit even if it comes into contact with other conditions. So if there is a fruitional result that would normally take place, then its capacity to arise is no longer there. Its ability to arise is no longer there, even if it comes into the contact with the conditions that would have normally made it come to fruition, because it's been weakened. And the same thing is true for our root virtues. When those root virtues come into contact with anger and wrong views. So it says, likewise, it is said that the anger and the production of wrong views weaken the ability of roots of virtue to give effects. So here, what this means is that our roots of virtue give rise to healing and a God's right. So if those are weakened, then those fruitional results won't occur, even if the causes and conditions are there. So if our root virtues are weakened, then those fruitional results won't occur because the capacity to produce them has been weakened, so there's an inability that's present there. And likewise, our non-virtuous seeds that would normally give rise to, at the greatest level, a hell, the medium level, hungry ghost, and a small level, animal realm, are weakened and then no longer have the ability to give rise to those fruitional results. So this is the next point that's made, and then it's Baba Vega's Blaze of Reasoning says, wrong views and malice weaken virtuous karma. Remedies such as repudiation, restraint, and confession weaken bad karma. Whenever any of these attitudes are present, they reduce the potency of the seeds deposited by the virtuous and non-virtuous karma, even though the combination of conditions for the karma to take effect are already in place. So where would an effect come from, and what would it be like? Because there is no combination of conditions for maintaining the potency of the seeds deposited by the karma, the time for being maintained has changed. Because of this, there is a thorough eradication of the karma. As it has been said, moreover, by upholding the sublime teaching, you will experience in this life the effects of a sin whose consequence you are certain to experience. And furthermore, with this remedy, karma for rebirth in the miserable realms transforms into a mere headache. So I just read that through. And Rinpoche said, etc. So we'll see if it's where it picks up for the next point. Decent.
What the Gawada Magi Sabmaji Nam Happy Kanlin de Bukaji Juan Juros, what about the Jideja? Two months after the Netukaresha.
Okay.
Majin Juan Juros at the gay Gawada Magi, what the Nebat Nyaba Shebatege, and then David Yum, soon and David Yomares, Tombache, Yuan Juros. Taya Deba Mat Kasure. Jen Tuba Mappy, Tujan, Jen June, Chetana Zawa Shinto, Jimba Maitis, Madakan Juaris, Madakan Dege, Cheketo Tambi, Chun Zimba Shibat, Yuanju, Nabi, Debayan, Tony Chula Yuan Juros, Sheshawatan, Jen Andro, Dru Lenane, Denengo, Nawataji, Tantum Juro She John Jungos. Tatanama Diva Tawan Madakan Diva to Kangalo, and Diva Shadan Shechivajeva Ina, Niwal Jiagi, Niwatan Solja Diva to David Sandel Mingurus, Tonchula Yuan Juros, Tonchu Sandemarbe, Niwal J. Dibile, Edatan Tonulja Dibile to Shadan Shechivajeva Ina. and then they would send them him with us, send the Dugana the New Dano Wizero. Then they go now at Sanji, Dibatan and yours, can see the TV, Nasa to Dibatan was a Palankash, Kirkash, Dibat or to Dibatan was a marbe. What the Niba the Red or Kazanga to the Nimadisha do the mother do the Kakare.
So this section actually gets separated. Gaduka, Judan Chen.
Tamago
Jensopa.
Gawata Magi, Sabanyam, Nebanyam, Pepe, Kanle, Debu Kanji, Juan Josado.
De Gewe Dame so Sapun.
Nebanyaba Jenjeta, Kaza. Gawata Magi, Sabanji, Nebanyabe, Kanle, Debu Kanji, Juan Josoti Tamatare. Tachen to be two maybe. Maybe two John Jean, what the Niba, Tenema leg and the Niba, the leg and Dua. Dibal Shadam of Jedaniwata, Yeda, Tundul Jiage, late to Sedel Pingris, Tonchula Nuan Joros, and then go now as a Dibatan Gris, Palankash, Karkash, or to Dibatan, what the Niba, the Niba.
So this Rinpoche is emphasizing that these points are separate. So then it says, because there is no combination of conditions for maintaining the potency of the seeds deposited by the karma, the time for being maintained has changed. Because of this, there is a thorough eradication of the karma, as it has been said. Moreover, by upholding the sublime teaching, you will experience in this life the effects of a sin whose consequences are certain to experience. And further, with this remedy, karma for rebirth in the miserable realms transforms into a mere headache. So if we have the application of a remedy, then a karma that would have normally given rise to a very bad result, a hell realm experience, for instance, could be experienced just by a mere headache in this particular life. So then the timing on the karma changes. It was previously something that would have given rise to a result in a future life, and now it is transformed into a karma that gives rise to a result in this life. So we see cases where this is possible, and where the experience changes and goes from the most highest level of suffering to the experience of something that is much milder and perhaps in this particular life. So this is what is meant by this second part of this section. Make sure I got everything. The Need Sampa Kangalasan.
What the Jiba do the Jiba? Jiba Sura Tangaba.
So that's all the points of number 4. Now we move on to number 5. And just make sure. I think I got everything. So, Napa. The Chutsu Jiba Dandra.
Oh, Daniel.
The Karma Niyure.
What the Nipotin?
Okay, we'll take a short break now.
What the Nabat what is going to do? Nabat what the Nabat Jajibin Debut Samo Luitan Megi Name Tawane Taba Magi Chusa Name Deba Tam de Luba in a Deba Mago Tawane Taba Gigamaris. What did Lani Chamadani Yungdua?
Kaba.
Getting go now at Sanchez Due. Getting go now at Santon Ju, Jebu Nas, Sawane, Shuma Chitaba in Shenas. I know Deba Tasul Kani, Oswakani, Deba Shit Chinijuzo Taba in a tea, Jebu Mare, and only Chigamaris, Chiche, Tanya Badele. And Deba Lajana Shechiba Jebaina, Nasun Jiage, Divi led the Sindel Minguris, who now touch the Tanaguris, or the Jibat Marvel Jiba. Sindel Mingu, Tonjul and Yuanjuro, and then go now touch the Dibat Tanaguris, or the Jibat Marvel Jiba. Jiba Tangaba de go now touch the Dibat Tabaina, and then you do it so on the Tabat Candes Tanaguris. And now that the Rebel was the Deba Nasun Page, Debi led what the Sendel Mene, Tonchul and Yuan Joro, go now that the Deba Tabaina, Deba Tavan Madabata, go now that the Rebel Vessel, what the two the Marba, Tuba led Marba, what the Larich would do what the
Napa, the giant ship, the Mingare.
Napa, what this is Napa the Nabadro de Debut Naba and Debut Tam Lujansa, Debut Tamo,
Chongo.
Debut Chong Lujan, Debatawan Madabi Junior Maris, Debatawan Tas Sugares, go now as Deba Nangason J. Deba to the Tabares, and then Debut go now as on the was what they Debatawan Taba is Lotus, Gerumaris. Who now that the Jabuna Debaton Madabi Nabayo Marakitas and Dears, what the Naba the Gunda Teres, and I knew what the Tajulun Chemunu, getting more dance of the Jew, Jabuyana, Tatu Marbe, and then I saw Page led to Sendel Min and Wu now such a Jabuyana, and the Debaton Madabata, Wu now such a Jabu. Tonchul and your image, that's it on Marveta. What the Dajel much over the Lanja or Rota. Getting go now on the Jew, Jebuyana, Sawane, Shuma Cheta in Shenas, and then go now on the Jebuyana, Dibatawan Tasa the Canaris, Chimarve, Tawaro Kushin, Chetabu Shena, Dibi Lena Jinjabo. Maluba Dubi, Niu Dunge, Nyansun Joa Les, Nason Pajege, and a legal or Namiji, Debu Yunsu Zuba de, and the Niu Dunge, Niu Dunge Maluba Tabares, Niu Dunge Maluba Taba in Rosa, Debatawan Tasu Judas, Gu Nazan Jebuyana Chaba Majons, Gu Nazan Jebuyana, Niu Dunge. Debatawan Madab Junior Mare, Debatawan Tasanji, Debatawan Taba Hinde, Ni Dungetsawan Taba Invasion, Ni Dungetsawan Taba, Debatawan Tabaris, Go Nasan Rebu and Chabamajos, what is it? What is Tajulune, getting go now out in Jew, Jebuyana, Sawan Shumacheta in Shena Kushin. Tadland or Enso, Dibi Lena Jebu, Maluba, Zuba, Niu, Dunge, Nyansun Joa Les, Nyawa Penge Legan Jebu, Zuba, the what the Niu Dunge, Nyansun Joa Le, Kandaki, Niu Dunge Malu, Niu Dunge Tamataya, Nyansun Majo Tini, Sawane, Shuma. Cheta Mayi, Debatawan Tabaris, New Dungatawan Taba Invasion. Go now such a Chabamajus, that Debatawan Dasa, New Dunga, Sawan Tabal Kogures. Cheta Mayins, Go Tawa Sajin, Sawa Son de la Jongu, Debu Yi Meba, Joa Cheta Yins. Go now to the Debatawan Messel of Maris. Nasupe lady deputy yours. Go now to the Nasupe lady in a new Dungasan Taba Insa, Debatawan doesn't do this.
Let's up.
What did they do? College loot.
So the fifth point that is made is that it is not inappropriate to call it a complete removal, even though a purified karma might still ripen into a headache or something in this life. It might be transformed from a rebirth into the lower realms of cyclic existence in a future life to an experience in this particular life. So it becomes a karma that you experience the effects of in this life, and it could be, for instance, a headache. So then there's a debate that takes place here, a question that arises that if this headache is a result of this karma, how can you say that there's a complete removal? So then it reads as follows. If karma that would otherwise result in rebirth in a miserable realm can be weakened and have the effect of being merely a headache, how can this be considered a complete removal? Then the reply is, the culminating effect of your sinful karma will be the experience of suffering in the hells. With this remedy, though you do not experience even tiny sufferings in the hells, how can this not be considered a very complete removal? Yet how could this effects of results of headaches and the like be examples of karma not having any effects? So here, what this is stating is there is nothing wrong or nothing contradictory. Stating that this is a complete removal doesn't contradict logic, because if we look at what was going to be the experience, what the main experience was going to be, it was going to be, for instance, a rebirth into the hell realm. All of that potential is gone completely. So there's a complete removal of that which would have caused this particular experience. So that potential is no longer there. And that's why it doesn't contradict logic to state that there's a complete removal, because there's this complete removal of ability, of potential for that action to give rise to what it would have. So here we see that there is a change. For instance, it gives rise to a result in this life instead. What it would have normally given rise to is completely removed, and that is why it can arise as a headache in this particular life. So this is also then not contradictory with the karma is still having some sort of a fruition, some sort of a result, just not what it was going to produce when it was acted out, when the action or karma was done. Dixon. So now we're at 6.
Tuji dibi saben jumbi nyebo manye chance nyebo doju song shada jeba ina ane dibi saben jum nyebo de yo maris nyebo doju song shada jeba ina dibi saben jum to ma ta jeda nyomo be saben da nyomo wa cha zi ko ya do nyomo be saben ane nyomo bonso nyomo saben bon bi chap nyomo bonso nyomo saben bon bi chagris nyomo saben ma pona nyomo bon to mares jide be lange nyomo chaba dress ya de monjo wa chade zare ma to saben bon bi chade mares saben bon bi chade de ane tonan dan golan ma to nyer marota toni monso to tonan dan golan wa de nyomo be saben jombi nyebe ragorta 통란 거서 통봉 뭐마 예다 통봉 사변 예부터 통란 타고로다 안에 공봉기 사변데 고란 보는 거로다 근데 고란 거서 맞도 용무도 왔다 다녀부터 따지던 샤단 제들래 안에 디바게 사변 좀비 예부터 요 말보다 얘나야 안에 어때 콜레 너네 어때 가서 조바 tuji dibi nyebo to so ko shada jeba yana dibi sabun mission bi nyebo to nyeyo mares manye chang diba nyam hebe debu meni bi debu jin to gres debu meni bazu to gres ta never done some Shana Jena, Nason Major so the Jagudo. These haven't want to manage the summer. Divis haven't bombala page, Tonan Golan to Same along Mato, Ponto Mangerosa.
Same la mena pontugumare.
Sabun Pontomas. Sabun. Numubi Sabun town, Numubi Pasha Sado. Netu Dajumbe, Numubi Sabun Bombains, Numubun and Numu Sabun Bombichap.
Lesso.
Numu Bacha Mapons, Numu Bacha City. Sanjib, Samajibato, Pasha Pontomas, or to Geshe Lharampa.
Lesso. So number 6 is that even though the afflictions can be destroyed by these this remedy, the seeds of the afflictions cannot. So the seeds of the afflictions have to be removed in order for the afflictions to be removed. So if the afflictions are removed, then the seeds of the afflictions are necessarily removed. So there is a difference between the word seeds of the afflictions and imprints of the afflictions. Imprints of the afflictions are referring to the obstructions to omniscience, and seeds of the afflictions are referred to those negativities which are abandoned at the path of seeing and at the path of meditation. So we find those the seeds that are abandoned at the path of seeing. Those that are abandoned at the path of seeing, and then those seeds that are abandoned at the path of meditation. So we have the wisdom realizing emptiness that abandons those seeds of seeing at the level of seeing, and then a wisdom realizing emptiness that abandons the seeds at the level of meditation. So that's what is meant here. And those obstructions to omniscience are only destroyed by the jhana, by the bodhisattva path, and those are what keep one from becoming a Buddha. One can become a foe destroyer of a Shravaka or a Prachika Buddha by removing the afflictions, which means that there has necessarily been a removal of the seeds of the afflictions, and this again is done at the path of, when we look at the 5 paths, at the path of seeing and at the path of meditation, but not those imprints. So this is the point that's made in this section, Deepa. I think I got everything. Lessa, Diksa.
Deepak Sabun Juminian, but also Teatanga, Parangata, Parasanga, the Buddhist was. Deepak Sabun Juminian, but Teatanga, Parangata, Parasanga, what the Nematu, and the Tolan Junaka Maruta. What does Lady Marbeta?
So those seeds of the afflictions are only removed at the path of seeing and at the path of meditation. So when we look at the mantra within the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, Teato Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhisoha, we know that that's referring to the, as a note, the 5 paths. The first Gate referring to the path of accumulation, the second Gate referring to the path of preparation. So we have the path of accumulation and then the path of preparation. Then Paragate referring to the path of seeing, Parasamgate referring to the path of meditation. So it's this Paragate and Parasamgate where we find the removal of this Paragate and Parasamgate, which are referring to the path of seeing and path of meditation, where we find the removal of the seeds of the afflictions. So we have the different levels of seeds that are removed at those pathways, but that's the only place that they're removed. So the Paragate and Parasamgate, path of seeing and path of meditation.
What the DB is happening to be able to what the Tonan and Golan you do that. Tonan goes to debate the 7th Jeva Pondu. Nason Paging led to 7th Jeva. Descending and do long Tadan Gabanjurus, descending and do long time. Tonan to what he said, ngandu lang ga no res ngasu pe ke le tu ga pon a deba tu pon no jero tenzin di ngandu lang na tadang ga ba jo o man jo ma ba tono to ba ti se ne ngasu ge lang ge ne ngasu lang ga no res
Lessa.
ngasu pe ke le tu ga no jero pon no ro Descendi in a little Tadangabanjuros, what the Toronto Batiste and the debug is happening to
So in Chandrakirti's entrance to the middle way, the Umajupa, a commentary on the root wisdom text, we find a quote that states that once one reaches the path of seeing, then there is an abandonment of the lower realms of cyclic existence. So that is at this path of seeing, and therefore we see that the seeds of the afflictions are then destroyed at that particular level, the seeds of cyclic existence, which are the seeds of the afflictions. They have a destruction that takes place at this path of seeing, and it destroys those seeds of the afflictions that would have given rise to a lower realm rebirth. So those particular ones are destroyed at the path of seeing.
What the Parangati because what the Debug Sabbath and Garden was a Congress, doesn't the Nadulan Tadangabanjus, Oman,
So we find in Chandrakirti's entrance to the middle way this idea that at the path of seeing, the lower realms of cyclic existence are abandoned or are stopped. And that's because the seeds of the misdeeds which give rise to those experiences are destroyed at the path of seeing, at the paragate in the mantra in the Hartra this Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. So this is what is meant by that. Decent.
Nyomuji Sabin Pumibu Mane Jans, Nyomuji Sabin Pumibu Mane Jan, Geje Jinyang Mepe, Jejin Tu Jan, Jebu Mijiba, Shidanagi Judy Lamobunsa. Tanya Buddha Song Shadan Jiba, what the Nyomugu Sabin Jumbi Never the Yomari de Ko Neji the Junguru, what they get Geje Nyam Mepe, and then Debu. Debu Menjiba ne, she Judilla Motua Yuare, Nagi Jindilla Motua Yuaris. What is the Shanag Judilla ne Moput Hongos?
So then Rinpoche just read this. You have not found a remedy that destroys the seeds of the afflictions, yet you have weakened the karma with a contrary condition. Consequently, even though other conditions do assemble, the karma does not fructify. You can see many such situations among external and internal causes and effects.
What the new Matumadu, the Negativua, Numu be Saban Jumbi, Nebu Mania Jan, Gejen Yam Hebis, Toji Song Shadan Jibaina. What the devil none, Numul none was rota, and no what the nobody was not the devil Yomoto was. She Judilla Momotua was, and then also Palawa Sea, Marbe, Palawa Sea, and then also Palawa Sea to Yobainaya, and then Satan should not lose to Masana, go and never check and then because of the change to my tune, children to what they turned up with a song. She Junde. That now is Judin more over that. Palawa see the David Jebala, Satan, Chutan, Ludan, who chained them over so good. Chema soon David children to. And she Junde. She Jude what the Palawa see or the so-called turned up my bed. What the moment one was, now the Jude what then it is. Moment was.
You have weakened the karma with a contrary condition. Consequently, even though other conditions do assemble, the karma does not fructify. you can see many situations among external and internal causes and effect. So when we're looking at, these are just examples of cause and effect relationships that things have with one another. So for instance, a flower has a seed, but in order for it to grow, there has to be many internal and external conditions that are present. There has to be water and earth and light and so forth. So all of these things have to be present in order for there to be a result.
어디 가도 너무 사변서도 너무 너무 보는 너무 사변 보면 참 너무 사변만 보는 너무 보면 말했어.
So
어디 버샷도 몸이 들어다.
So in many texts it states that if you have destroyed the afflictions, you have necessarily destroyed the seeds of the afflictions, and if you have destroyed the seeds of the afflictions, you have necessarily destroyed the afflictions. So we find this in many texts.
테메다 좀베 아니 녀모 본사바요서 녀모 사면 본사바레스 녀모 사면 본사데 녀모 바자 본마레스
맞아.
어디 녀모 바자 테메다 좀 줄어 요아레스
맞아.
어디서도 젠라 몸모서 왔다 주더 좀 왔다 어디 가서 그래 테메다 좀 녀모 바자 요베 따먹고 요아레스 테메다 좀 벌래 녀 테메다 좀베 녀모 본바 인사 녀모 사변 본 거です. 녀모 보는 녀모 사변 본 비ಚಾ오. 녀모 사변만 보나 녀모만 본 비차오. 녀모 사변 본소나 녀모 본 바레스. 테메다 좀 녀모 본 바레. 네 녀모 사변 본 바레. 녀모 바차 본 마레스. 녀모 바차 예베 다좀 버틀 따모요 와레스. 에네트 발해소나 아. 다좀 버틀 녀모 바차 예베 따요 와레스. 주더 좀 버틀 젠라 몸모서 와다스. 네 에네트 바차도 다좀 버틀 지 창자바나 버틀 지금은 플래그 What do you mean by that?
The guy consider jumping.
Jumping out some say number to the such a in and number the was the plague some say man.
Such an in, Sena?
In a quiet place.
Okay.
Quiet place what the Henny and Ara plague.
So will do.
What the new move by is.
Okay.
And that is Jela Momo saw us. Young Lobel drama machine, but the Johnsona. One I made a Kozuris and the lower yours. Jela Momo saw us.
That's it.
What did you move by Shavita is?
That's it. So when we look at this removal, this word of removal of the afflictions, if there is a removal of the afflictions, there is necessarily has been a removal of the seeds of the afflictions. If the seeds of the afflictions haven't been removed, then there are afflictions present. So we find that if there is one, there is necessarily the other. So a Hinayana foe destroyer has destroyed the seeds of the afflictions, and therefore has destroyed the afflictions, but has not destroyed the imprints of the afflictions. So these are two different things. What are some signs that the Hinayana foe destroyer still has the imprints of the afflictions? So for one, they go to in a kind of fields, quiet places, and they frolic and jump around, and they say that some of these movements of their body are caused by the imprints of the affliction. So this is one example that's given. And then also these Hinayana foe destroyers still engage in blame. So saying, I didn't do that, that other person did that. So this blaming is a result of still having these imprints of the afflictions. Even though they are in a state of foe destroyer, a state of liberation, they still have these imprints present. So they still have these behaviors that are influenced by these imprints.
Deba Druba Nawa Jijiki, what the Nebadilla, Pacha Lodumandra, Deba Druba Nawa, Dajun was Deba Druba Nawa. Tuni Matubi, Karsuri, Sheba in a Nedu, denru na yu chang res toni ngosu to ma to bi sheba ina denru na yu chas toni ngosu to tona da golan to ma to ne wo te phabi juje la to le ne deba to na yu res deba to na de shiri ba cha nde res ba cha
Tonglan Dembi Drupa Nawa Yurbe.
Yuri, Tonglan Gulang, Sama Jiba Debatu Nadi Yorda, Pasha de Mabombarova, or the Debatu Nadi Wore, Pasha de Yutan, Debatu Nadi Wore, Numu Sabe Yutan, Numu Shamachi Wore, Numu Sabe Bonsa, Numu Shamachi Maro, Numu Pasha Bonsa, Debatu Nadi, Sanjil Debatu Nadi Maruda, Pasha's what to Suwarita. What to say, the Shisha Nependurta.
The Sopun Pacha, Demba Drupa Nawa, the Nyomon Sopun, you know?
Nyomon Sabins and Nyomon Sabins, Nyomo Shama Jinuniba. Sabin Yena Shuku Nyomocha. Pacha is not Debatu Nawa Jinuniba the Pacha. That was the Debatu Nawa.
Okay, listen.
What the Debatu Nawa the Pacha and the place.
So, as a result of the imprints of the afflictions, even a foe destroyer has this nawa, this experience of the true establishment. So, Demba Drup, the true experience of true establishment, that things are truly established. There is still the presence of this experience there, and that is brought about by the imprints of the afflictions, the obstructions to omniscience. So even when there is a Hinayana is having or any being, I'm sorry, even at the any being at the path of seeing, where there is this wisdom realizing emptiness, or the path of meditation, there is still this experience of the true establishment that is brought about by these imprints of the afflictions. So there is still this kind of experience of it, experience of a true establishment taking place because of the influence of the imprints of the afflictions.
Oh, that no Jinbiji Lajina do Tena, Goa Mamusupa La, Juan, Goan Jumbi, Kundusu, Masuna, and Hatter Son Base, and Son on the Babos, what the Goa Mosaba in Goa Gay, Goa Gay, what the Kundu Lota to the Abu Masumba Ina, and what the Kundu the Lota Gitan Jungres. What the Kuru the Lota the Abasungres, Son La, Beijing, and the Megawa Shitubala, Tomasha. What the Goan Junji Kuru the Lota the Abasun, and the Megawa Shitu Magawa Shitu, Danya Buddhist to Marban, Shedula, Tsong-kha-pa, so what did Truba the Pato.
So number 6, therefore, although you strive at the accumulation of much virtuous karma, you do not guard against the causes that destroy virtuous karma, such as anger. The virtuous karma will not give its effect as stated above. Hence, you must strive to guard against the causes that destroy virtuous karma and make an effort to remedy non-virtuous karma. So even if you try to accumulate virtuous karma, if you don't guard against that which destroys it, then you are defeating the purpose. You're not doing what is necessary in order to guard it. So this is the point that's made in number 6, is that not only are you making an effort to engage in virtuous karma, you should guard against the destruction of your virtuous karma, and then also make an effort to remedy your non-virtue as well.
That Dumba do what is Udre. Dumba Shindu Tudan Dembi Lejan, Tenjon Nunas, Munji Leji Napa Member Matusu, Tanda Tel Kuaj Lanchi Jagundua. Nyabu Toji San when the Shatu Debi Shana Jebaina, Deva Tenjuan Nuna, Deva Tatu Labaina, and then Munji Leji Napa Member Matuso, Shesun between that carriers, Kushima, Shenas, Tajid Yaja Del Nejagua. Milun su ne, milun su, name Trubitsana, Tata Jinebi, Jean Kala, Jebu Marubi, Ju Kona, Double Hawala Gune, Theatre, Sombi Jumedos, Theatre Sombi Jumedos, what a legendaba member the Matu Societe, what did Jebu True Sadule. Jabut true sadul then what the dua the Galik covers. Jabut the Madrubi, Jew gonna do lagune, Lena Kabajan, Chumusas, Sanjik to Sombares. Tangasu Joalan, Rutadu Milua, Kamasha Judan, Zubu Yamamuya Marba. What the Jabut true sadu, and then what the dua the Galipua, Galik covers. Kalkabu is a legend number member the Matuso said, Telugu, and degrees, what the night Jagodotel.
So here, this next point that's being made is pointing the difficulty of abandoning karma that's already come to fruition. So, for instance, if someone is a human being, but then has a problem with the eyes or has a problem with the body of some sort or the limbs, that has already come to fruition. So changing that is very difficult. So that's the point that's made here. Quam, if you can totally remove even very powerful karma, how is it that the sutras say, except for the fruitions of former karma? And then the reply, there is no fault with this reasoning. The Buddha spoke in this way with the following intention. When fruitions such as blindness already exist, it is difficult to remove them with a remedy. However, it is easy to stop the effects from arising at the time of the cause, when the effect has not already taken place, the Blaze of Reasoning says. So if there hasn't already been fruition, then it's removable, but it's difficult to remove something that's already come to fruition. And then again, the examples are given of a problem with the eyes, or of mind, or limbs, and so forth.
Legend number member the Matuso said, what did Tangan Nason Joan and Zubuta Suna? Misha Gutan. Kambasha Judan, Zul Junior, what the Lanson, Poakali Cabres, Legend number member Matu said, Legend number member Teres, Ju Duso, and what the Sukaya Lelabres. Telagune, Nekabajan, Legend number member, or Matu so the Swat Sanjik Hotel Telgumbares, Hotel Dejagodua. Telgumbares, Sundus, and a few Legends, Legends of Dangdua. Tugumbawa, Kete Deba Shinto Seba Jua Yinas, Kete Deba Shinto Seba Jua Yina, Jish, Nemhaji, Naba Miban Matusos. Never told you some going to Deba the Seba Yina, Jua Yina, and the Jish, Sanju Jonen de Jumhaji, Legend of Matuso. She Jetaten Jenas, and the legend of Matuso Sungua Jusankaras, Tenjenas, Kushem Marbe, Hotel Tale Marvele, Milutan, Mi Jibatan, Mi Jibat Shautan, Tembutan, Kubatan, Yambala Suba, Kubatan Yambala Suba, Mo Nito, Jubi, Jutan, Devenyon, Lonshubi. Lonshu Balagone, Temba in this. Jawad Land Sadul, Jawad Teeth and a Misha wood, Anju and Batan, or the Kuba to the Namgyal Monastery. What the Tsong-kha-pa, the Tsong-kha-pa, Legend number of the Matusu, Telgumbares,
Lesser.
Ledenji Jun Teredua,
Lesser.
Tenjina, Milutan, Mi Jibatan, Shautan, Tebutan, Kubatan, Yamba, Yambala Suba. Ngoni to Chibi, kuba dunba cha sadu ne judan jebu nyawa longshe bala gune temba yintes lena keba jan chumusa se to hotel tel gune sombares kangi shere naba mebi nagoji ngojubi nameji jebu ne yonzo sebane o mainos namen trutsadu o de kale kabres legenda ba matus o de sombares jujubi namegi legi ju duso anshana jegen le labres jujubi sembe ngondo duje sheba ne sembi chebarje tobana yonzo seba jimba yentesa ju o de ju duso o jana jegen ka tugres cheta de puna example sumi chamaruba sumi chamata majida ta ne sukata pa soba ta nyangé mela soba temba jino so de loju mo so do de o de dumba dre.
So number 7 then deals with this karma that has come already to fruition and the difficulty of stopping it, but the ease of being able to stop it at the time of the cause. So if you can stop the behavior at the time of the cause before you engage in it, then the effect definitely can't arise. But if there is already an arisal of the result, and then examples of being blind or mute or crippled and so forth, then it's difficult to change that karma. So here it says, if you can totally remove even very powerful karma, how is it that the sutras say, except for the fruitions of former karma? There is no fault with this reasoning. The Buddha spoke in this way with the following intention. When fruitions such as blindness already exist, it is difficult to remove them with a remedy. However, it is easy to stop the effects from arising at the time of the cause, and when the effect has not already taken place. The Blaze of Reasoning states, so this is Master Baba Vega, it says, if it is the case that a sin will be completely eliminated, why did the Buddha teach except for the fruitions of former karma? Then there's a reply. The Buddha taught this while having in mind the case of the karma of blindness, having one eye, being lame, crippled, dumb, deaf, and the like, where there is no ability to eliminate the effects of karma that has already come to fruition. The intention that is in the form of a cause comes to an end when you acquire a different motivation. This is demonstrated by the cases of people who committed murder but later repented, such as Angumala, Jatasatru, Ashoka, Svaka, and those who killed their fathers. So here, the point that's being made is that we can see cases where people have been able to change the motivation and change then the karma. And they give Marchetta and all these different examples of beings who've been able to do that. So it says, the intention that is in the form of a cause comes to an end when you acquire a different motivation. So when the cause is no longer there, then the result can never come. So this is the point that's being made here, that you can eliminate the cause of something before it comes to fruition, but the fruition of the thing itself is difficult to remove because it's already come to fruition. It's the continuum has already happened or been experienced.
So there
are many stories about this, and then we find in the letter to a friend many stories, and some of the names here relate to those stories. So if you look at the commentary on the Nagarjuna's letter to a friend, it's very, very clear. So first you have Marcheta.
Majida what is Majida what is talk about the Jabuji Paying by Jabu Majida Jabuji Paying Barwa and then Baba the Chul Gabuji Jabu Chul Chujigan to Dingeroda and the cool number the DB number movie orders DB number to Pulana to Papa say waters Papa the Masin the Chujabuji to Maris then what they and the book what the Baba Langal saying was a Katula Sega Tamaris, the Papa Sega. And the Baba saying to the Baba Low, that you Sega Towns. Ladu and the Baba Ganala Tomchu Tsong-kha-pa says, Nepal land law us. And then not to Baba is to possibly something lazy sayoris. And then I Drajumba is Drajumba Sevi Samaj Lady, Chul Samang Leni, Ninjo, what you saw Majida, Nihaya Dibal Shana of Chematu, what did you pull the Laja Ruges? What the Majida, Baba says, I do talk on Jobba Cheba, Joba Jena, and the Sonji Kunil Chena, Majida in Joba Sevindus, Dojurendo. Padaman says, Jabuzan the Jeju, Yoko Kota Jejuna, Mantabani the Jurus. When the Swaji was in the Le, Padaman says, is Pamasin and Diggers, I'm one of Euro. Yoko Kota Jejuna, Mantabani, then you like you need to pay me about Zuba in our Tene, Tabaturis, in the Suma Sarvata, Majida and Juba Seventus. What does the lady do? What
the Parsep or Masep, Garisumbre, the Tama Garisum.
Jabu Majid or the Passaver Pa.
Passebre, then
Kupat the Jabu Imbarwa,
the Dajumba.
Baba Chujin the Dajumba here. And on the DB to what the Chubaba say was that Chubaba Masena, Chujabaji to Maris, and Kubaba Segatan Langal, Baba Simol. I know what the Baba pulled the Laruches in Nepal. Not to Baba is a Baba Sivis Hamajili, Juniores, not Dajumba, Dajumba Sivis Hamajili, Nichun, Tamili, Yoris, or the shadow Majin Yakayodas, pulled the Lantic Arusian, Nasin Ligris. What then what the Punjabaji and the Swanji, Majida, and Jobasi is Undoji.
The Marcheta, the Kong Paba Seson, then Kong Marcheta Paba Seson.
Majida Baba says, Baba says, I do what they could. Baba could land, could loss at the Kunjubaji. I don't go Swanji.
Okay.
And Swanji Majida and Jobasi was Undoji.
So we find Marcheta is one of the first names. I'm sorry, I don't know which Sanskrit name it connects to. So Marcheta, we find the story of, and Marcheta killed his father. His father was a king, and then there were many bad influences in the area that didn't like the Dharma. The father was very influenced by the Dharma. And when his son decided that he would kill him anyway because of being under the influence of bad people. And then when he was killing him, his father was able to tell him that you should really regret having done this, because first of all, I'm your father, and this is one of the heinous crimes of killing your mother or father, and also I'm a foe destroyer. So then this is also another among the heinous crimes. So after hearing this, Marcheta became very he regretted very much this deed of killing. And then he went to the Buddha because of this regret that he had. And then the Buddha gave him the practices of the four opponent powers. Dene, the Sanjay, the Neba Dorje Kontri Sun, Dene?
That Majida, that Jeba, the Jeba, the Tesmadu, Jeba, Majida, Masweba, Tala, Gisambajan, Jeba, Yujin to Jishir, Leseva Majune, Name Tato, Jishinas, or the Kushin Marbe Kushin, Kid Majida, Masweba, Tala, and the Gis, 给上前节吧月经都即使来的时候嘛就呢你往那边看的是结果的是亏钱嘛的不亏钱那么到这些呢第一来等这不了来等这不了一切这边是那边就就完了说吧但把人接是来呢他们马路吧马这边的马一的是你话给这不的他们马路吧马这边谁有的是大家普通的吧来怕把钱多在街上他把人拉你没有听我说讲马里把人的日本马人的在这呢这把心多早晚呢这把样做了来了这不没把样马人的先生说我的结巴他马去的话的下当前对吧大一么大马去的对吧大呢你忘记吗你忘记吗你忘那边去吗你忘那边去呢你忘那边去吧呢你对吧马路吧大吧的是可是我连着来一起比些都你忘了去吧也是去吧的嘛都你对吧马路吧马大吧嘛的是大家普通的吧那还算是谁的嘛普通都是叫吧的包都是老上把可能老上你忘了去吧的老上两家也讨厌一路的你都跟牛肉嘛的是的
kon da jomba chama son
可大中大刚才你忘了
sanjay tu vene then marcheta the papadan says then the kon neba dorje
shadan jene tiba taba imbaro
tiba dasun then kon yawa jesu
ni wa namel jiba
ale okay
ni ma le ne la iche be namel jiba temba res le na hama maluba maziba na maite ni le na hama maluba se res pulun taba le paba jentos tanga bol dam marbe bol do sin na so pa rote ni on choose la so ya what the new do ngi de no ma
lasso
de ba shin to tawa ne jin ba ya tu las le la de bu me ba ya ma yin no she so se je ba de
so then there's a question that arises, the qualm. Upon their deaths, Ajata Sutra, so this is Marcheta, this is the one that Rinpoche was just telling the story of. Ajata Sutra, and their killers of their mothers had developed other virtuous attitudes. Why then were they reborn in the unrelenting hell? Did they fail to eliminate their karma? This we went over before. We were saying that the being was able to jump out of the realm and not have to experience the suffering. So it was taught, the reply is, it was taught that they were reborn in such places as the unrelenting hell in order to develop conviction in their karma and its effects. So they had this experience to develop this faith and conviction in karma and its results, but they didn't have to experience what was going on there. It is not the case that they failed to completely eliminate their remaining karma. Like a silk ball that falls and bounces up, they were born in a hell and were then freed. They were also untouched by the fiery garlands of hell and so forth. This being so, it is proven both that you can completely eradicate sins and that karma certainly has effects. So here, Ajata Sutra, Satru, because of his devotion, his faith and commitment to Lord Buddha, and the application of the four opponent powers and the confession of his downfalls, he was able to not have to experience the normal suffering in the unrelenting hell. It was abiding there but not experiencing it. So it says that falls and bounces up. Like a silk ball that falls and bounces up, they were born in a hell and were then freed. So this idea, the way that Rinpoche is explaining it, is as if they're bouncing away out of the, jumping away from the suffering, like a bouncing ball. That's the meaning behind that.
Less so.
So Marchita didn't have to experience the suffering in the unrelenting hell because of the purification that took place. I think that's Dutsar.
Oh yeah. Oh, that didn't what the Jebadala good in Jetsar Chimatu.
So that's 8 of Jayan Sheba's outline. We only have one more to get to the 9th point. So we'll end there, and we'll do the concluding mandal offering and dedication prayers. The Kapija Sheda Govudu. The giant, the Sacha, the Kapija Sheda Goyu. The Neng, the dictionary Datu.
Share copy in though.
Share Kabu the dictionary Dana, the Sache Zoo.
Not to teach us the Kalete and what the did was.
Data. Okay, so we'll do the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. The fundamental ground, scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All-powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Wandak, holder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts with exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Tuji Rinpoche Lobsang Tenzin Chenmo